population, but is marked by
We can't hear you.
Yes, it is disconnected, or only I am not hearing.
I am also not hearing.
There's a small technical problem. We'll be back in about a few, just give us.
The beginning is like South Asian problems.
Technology.
Because if there is no solution, then the people go to the technicalities.
Am I audible now, ladies and gentlemen? I think connectivity and internet again got the best of us. Well, I'm back. I hope I'm audible and you can also view me streaming live.
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, Noor, you're audible.
Good to be back. Okay, let's begin the session. Ladies and gentlemen, I, Nurulan, extend a warm welcome to you on behalf of Islamabad Policy Research Institute, IPRI, at this webinar titled South Asia and Peace. South Asian region is home to 25% of global population, but is marked by deteriorating economic conditions and volatile domestic political environments. The region also lags behind in terms of connectivity and bilateral trade. India-Pakistan's nuclear rivalry and Afghanistan's perpetual instability makes it ever difficult for long-term bilateral trust to develop between South Asian states. This makes trade, connectivity, diplomacy, and dialogue even more difficult for this conflict-prone region. In today's discussion, we would like to focus on disturbing trends of underdevelopment, protraction of conflicts, and strategic distrust prevalent in the region, and how regional states, Pakistan in particular, could navigate the situation to pursue its strategic, security, and economic goals. Before we begin the presentations from our accomplished speakers for the event, let us first hear President IPRI, Ambassador Dr. Major General Raza Mohammad's opening remarks for the event. Ambassador Raza has served Pakistan by leading diplomatic missions to Mauritius, Madagascar, and Comoros. He has served as Additional Secretary in Ministry of Defense Production and has held various prestigious command and staff assignments during his time in military service. It's over to you, President.
Thank you so much, everyone, and good afternoon to everyone. And good morning to some who are in the areas where it is morning now. We are very delighted and very grateful to you all that you are here. And I especially extend a great thank you to Universal Peace Federation of Austria and Dr. Yasir Khan, who actually made it possible that we could hold a joint seminar and a joint webinar. I'm very delighted to say that Dr. Heinz Gartner, Professor Paul Scott, Dr. Afsar Rathore, Rashid Wali Janjua, and Nurul Ain, which is moderating from our side, and there are so many other participants who are here, will be giving their views on South Asia and peace. As Nurul Ain was saying, that it is very important for South Asia to connect peacefully. When we see it in the backdrop of Pakistan's new security policy, national security policy, which was issued in 2021, it has shifted the focus of Pakistan's all the efforts from geosecurity to geostrategy to geoeconomy. And human security has been termed as most important. But when we want to shift to the economy, it is not possible without peace in the region. And peace in the region is the foremost, peace with the neighbors is the foremost requirement of connectivity, trade, prosperity, and human security. So with this small background, I hand you over back to Noor Ain, and we hope that this webinar is going to make a great contribution, and we come up with some recommendations which help us resolve the conflicts and disputes in the region. And for the sake of people's betterment, for the sake of human security, for the sake of regional security, we connect together and we are able to resolve our small differences. I always give example of the European Union. EU has been formed, and EU is like one country today. They have one visa, one passport, one currency also. There are about 26 countries and 25 countries now. And in 2 wars, and 100 years war, and 30 years war, millions were killed in Europe. And ultimately, they started off with the Postal Union, then they went to the Red Cross, then they had the European Coal and Steel Community, and then EEC, European Community, and then the EU. So when, after loss of millions and trillions of rupees and millions of people, if they can become one country, why can't South Asia be able to resolve their differences and for the peace and achieve peace for the people of this region? With this, back to Noor Amin. Thank you, Noor Ain. Thank you.
Thank you, President IPRI, for your wonderful remarks and for welcoming our speakers and participants. Let us now move towards the presentation analysis by distinguished speakers. Let me also politely request all worthy speakers to make sure that they wrap their presentations and thoughts within 8 to 10 minutes. I, however, might take the liberty of reminding you by 8 minutes in chat box, just to make sure that all our speakers have enough space and time, and there will be ample time for an engaging Q&A session at the end. Our first speaker is Dr. Professor Heinz Gardner. Dr. Gardner lectures at Department of Political Science at University of Vienna. He was academic director of the Austrian Institute for International Affairs. He was also Austrian Marshall Plan Foundation Fellow at the Johns Hopkins University in Washington, D.C. Among other things, he chairs the advisory board of the International Institute for Peace in Vienna and of the Commission Strategy and Security of the Austrian Armed Forces. Heinz Gardner received the Bruno Kreisky Award for Most Outstanding Political Books. We are very interested to hear his thoughts on emerging geopolitics in South Asia and how it's likely to affect the security dilemma and region's overall stability. It's over to you, Professor.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much for the introduction, and I want also to thank IPRI for organizing this meeting and Dr. Khan for having this idea to set the meeting up. I will talk more about the global geopolitical situation and the polarization we live in. Polarization is regional and global. And I will refer to the role of neutral and non-aligned states as well. And if I have time, I will briefly come at the end to a peace proposal, as you suggested, which was made for Europe, but it might be also applicable for South Asia. So, as I said, we live in an area of polarization. It's a global polarization. We have the great powers, US, China, and also Russia involved in a war, but we have also regional polarizations, and South Asia is one of them. East Asia is another. and the Middle East, and now, of course, Europe with the war. So I will briefly go through the types of polarization we have experienced after the Second World War, but then the lessons learned for other situations of polarization, whether it's regional or global. And of course, we know after the end of the Cold War, the Cold War started, and we have this type of bipolarity with two military blocs, the Warsaw Pact and NATO and Europe, with leading states, the US and the Soviet Union. So the Cold War and the bipolarity was about blocs, but there have been exemptions of the blocs, and these were the neutral and non-aligned states, neutral and non-aligned states in Europe, and but it was also after Austria in 1955 got its neutrality, it was also the birth of the non-aligned movement. So this non-aligned, neutral and non-aligned states tried to stay out of the bloc. So they were not part of the Cold War. They tried to stay out of the situation of bipolarity. And in this situation, and especially the non-aligned and neutral states in Europe could play a very constructive role, for example, by setting up the CSE process, which I will come back to it at the end of my presentation. So in order to be brief, of course, after the end of the bipolarity, we moved on to a situation of unipolarity. Charles Krauthammer, the American political scientist, called it the unipolar moment. And the idea was we have a hegemonic US power. And this was a very difficult situation for neutral and non-aligned states. The non-aligned movement almost disappeared, and the pressure on neutral states have been increasing, because if you have unipolarity and one hegemon, there is not much room for non-alignment or neutrality. And especially when I may refer to Austria, the American ambassadors always came to the Austrian defense and foreign minister and said, why don't you send more troops to Afghanistan? Austria's troops amount was very limited, and they tried to stay out. And as it turned out now, the Austrian decision was correct, not to get embroiled too much into this war. Political scientists in the US want to say the situation is a hegemonic peace, but it was far away from a hegemonic peace. New American studies show that it was a period when most of the US military interventions took place since 1775. There have been about 400 military interventions, and 25% fell into this period. This was also the time of NATO expansion, this unipolar phase, and NATO expansion was one of the causes of the war in Ukraine, what we have right now. So now we have this unipolar situation is coming to an end, and political scientists are talking about a situation of multipolarity. I think that's a little bit of a euphemism, because most of the American security documents speak about great power competition, US, China, and Russia. Because only those states have also the military dimension of a great power. Of course, we have multipolarity on the economic levels, and so observers mentions the BRIC states, also Japan, European Union, India, and Brazil. But it's mainly an economic multipolarity. So what we have a great power competition, and the great power competition always comes with two features: alliance building and ideology. So the US President Biden likes to speak about democracies versus autocracies, which of course is an ideology which is very similar to the one during the Cold War, and it is some time of hypocrisy as well, because if geopolitics comes into play, of course, geopolitics always trumps ideology and values. The US is also trying to build up new alliances, except NATO. We have AUKUS with Australia, Great Britain, and US, but also involving South Asia and India and Japan and Great Britain and the US with the Quad, the so-called Quad, and South Korea is considering to participate in this alliance as well. So, and ideology in China has the Belt and Road Initiative of China has some sort of soft power, and it's attractive. But Russia so far doesn't have a good ideology. So Peter the Great or Russification or denazification is not an attractive ideology. So Russia was felt trapped in the NATO expansion in the West and the expanding Chinese influence with the Belt and Road Initiative in the East. And President Putin took the very fatal decision to go to war in order to stay in this great power competition. And now NATO is everywhere around Russia, a situation what he wanted to avoid. So last point, smaller states have two options in this situation. Either they can bandwagoning with a big power, join in one of those alliances. And for example, Finland and Sweden decided now to leave the neutral non-aligned state and join NATO. So, but at the same time, they are entrapped. So if, for example, NATO Article 5 is a commitment to go to war for other member states, even though it's not in your interest. So, but that is a decision based on the belief that you get security promises. The second option, what smaller states have, is to stay non-aligned or neutral, to stay out of the great power competition as during the polarization during the Cold War, and not to get entangled in foreign wars. Of course, there is the fear of abandonment, but a non-alignment neutrality as such, I cannot expand on this right now, is a very good security guarantee. I can bring examples later on. So non-alignment and neutrality will be the second option. So lastly, a proposal, for a peace proposal, of course, as it looks like now in Europe, there will be a new Iron Curtain from the Arctic to the Black Sea, running right through Ukraine, great division again, as we had during the Cold War in Europe. But there was a proposal, and it was an initiative by the non-aligned and neutral states, as I mentioned, the CAC Helsinki Summit 75, and that could be an example also for South Asia. If you look at the documents of the 75 Helsinki Summit, so they're not mentioning once foe, enemy, rival, competitor, challengers, that they're not mentioning it. Then today, security documents are full of these expressions. They all speak about cooperative, common security, security is indivisible. And this is a document which tries to avoid the security dilemma that the advisories always try to act defensively, but it would be seen offensively by the other side. So the Helsinki, took place during the height of the Cold War, but the Helsinki Accord could be an example also for South Asia to overcome the tensions in the region. Thank you very much for the moment.
Thank you so much, Professor, for this very profound take on the irony which faces several regions in the shadows of great power competition unfolding. Let's move to our second speaker, that is Brigadier Dr. Rashid Wali Janjua. He is currently serving as the Director of Research at IPRI. He holds a civil engineering degree from Military College of Engineering, has graduated from Command and Staff College, Quetta, and National Defense University, Islamabad. He also holds a master's in Security and Defense Management from Royal Military College, Kingston, Canada, and a PhD from NUST. He frequently writes on issues pertaining to national security. Given his extensive experience in military and a firm grip on defense and security issues, we are keen to hear his thoughts on the unfolding Afghan situation and its impact on regional security. It's over to you, Brigadier Rashid, please.
Thank you very much, Noor. I thank President IPRI and distinguished scholars who have afforded me this platform to share my views on peace dynamics in South Asia and Afghanistan situation and its impact on South Asia. So basically, I'll briefly be touching upon what are the peace dynamics in South Asia and how instability in Afghanistan is impacting those dynamics. South Asia, as you know, comprises India, Pakistan, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and these are the countries that were bound in a political and economic union, which was supposed to take off, but it hasn't taken off in right earnest, and that was Association of South Asian Regional Countries, known by its acronym SAARC. Now, SAARC story is a microcosm of whatever wrong has happened with South Asia. South Asia, unfortunately, had been a victim of continual geopolitics. And this geopolitics has impacted upon our economic integration, and the economic potential has been relegated to the lower order of priorities. Geopolitics has been preferred. As a result, there have been arms races, there have been frequent conflicts, and the instability which was in Afghanistan also impacted these dynamics. The biggest destabilizer in the region is the big power politics, the global power competition. So this competition between two global powers, that is United States and China, that is defining the dynamics of security, and it is having its impact on economic integration of the region as well. After USA's departure from Afghanistan, a hope was kindled for peace and stability in Afghanistan and concomitant economic integration in South Asia. The desire for regional economic integration to improve the human security indices was evident in the shape of our new geo-economics-centered national security policy unveiled in 2020. Pakistan's sincere overtures, however, to bury the hatchet with India, founded on the rocks of Indian unwillingness to enter into any meaningful dialogue for resolution of all intractable disputes. The main setback to the regional economic and political integration in South Asia is the lack of interest by the most influential country, that is India, without which South Asia cannot be unified, and both the countries, Pakistan and India, unless they resolved their differences and reinvigorated this regional, mechanism like SAARC, then the problem of continual strife would keep plaguing both these countries. And what is happening is that if we compare with the rest of the world, South Asia is the least economically integrated region. So the intra-regional trade here is only 6%. And if we compare ourselves with the East Asia, the economic integration of the region is 35%. And in the Europe, it is 60%. So There is a great potential for trade and economic integration. The current trade is just a paltry 3 billion, and from there onwards, it has the potential to go to 20 billion. These are the World Bank figures. And by 2030, this figure can go as high as 35 billion US dollars. That is just the trade between India and Pakistan. So imagine the kind of economic bonanza both the countries would reap. Then there is a question of regional connectivity and leveraging our location for economic integration with South Asia, Central Asia. Now, if South Asia is ever to have a hope of economic integration with Central Asia, Pakistan is the connector. But without connector, or without the nations that want to connect, that is India, no integration is going to materialize. What is India doing instead is going for sub-regionalism at the cost of regional integration. India has encouraged, sub-regional groupings like BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal, multi-sectoral technical security assistance treaty. So that BIMSTEC is trying to integrate 5 out of 8 South Asian nations into a separate grouping, which is east of Pakistan's border. And it does not redound to the advantage of the entire South Asia if an alternative grouping like that is created, which includes Bangladesh, India, Bhutan, Thailand, and the 5 countries which are under the political sway of India at the moment. Then there are problems with the Chinese. Indians have the border conflict. The border conflict defines the relationship at the moment, where some territorial losses have been incurred on part of India, and there is a kind of uneasy standoff on line of actual control, the border of China and India. But despite that, there is a 90 billion US dollars trade, mutual trade between India and China. So the hope of economic integration because of these economic dividends, it still glows very strong and robust. And if India does not, play the role of a regional surrogate in the China containment policy of United States, then I think it's a win-win proposition for South Asia and also for for regional connectivity beyond South Asia. South Asia is going to achieve its economic apogee when it connects with Central Asia, when it connects with China and East Asia as well. So the economic advantages that geography confers on us are prodigious. All we've got to do is to keep our political differences on the back burner, or even if some of the issues and disputes are irresolvable, those could be kept on the back burner in the interest of larger economic integration. But contrarily, the big power rivalry is pulling, this India and Pakistan's political and economic union in opposite poles. For example, there's an Indo-Pacific alliances coming up, manifested in the shape of Quad, which is being sponsored by the United States. And its Anglo-Saxon variant is now AUKUS, which comprises Australia, UK, and United States. And China is being viewed as one of the in adversarial terms. So the United States and its allies focus, the center of gravity of their political capital has shifted away from South Asia to East Asia. So that is another reason why the focus of the West is not on this region and Afghanistan. Now, having touched briefly on these South Asian dynamics as to why the economic and political union is hostage to these negative currents, I touch upon Afghanistan situation, how it impacts upon South Asian security dynamics. Now, Afghanistan is a natural land bridge between Central Asia and South Asia, because if Pakistan and India need to connect to Central Asia, Afghanistan is the shortest route. There are already projects like CASA, Turkmen Afghanistan pipeline. There is a talk of Trans-Afghan Railway corridor. And all those corridors are asking to be made because they are economic viability proposition wise. Those are the most suitable economic and energy corridors, and that would underwrite the energy security of both India and Pakistan for a long time to come. But why is it not happening? It's not happening because of unstable security situation in Afghanistan. We know that after 2 decades of stay in Afghanistan, United States has departed, leaving unstable Afghanistan. The precipitate withdrawal by United States left Afghanistan in the hands of Taliban regime. Now, that's a regime that established control over entire Afghanistan. So the pluses were that the entire Afghanistan, after very long, was under one strong indigenous government, which claimed to hold levers of power in all the regions. But with that came international isolation. The international community did not accord recognition. Then economic freeze was applied, their assets were frozen, and a kind of a pariah status was accorded to the present regime. Now, because of that, a country which was weaned on economics of war, a war economy, it fell into a greater spell of instability. A humanitarian crisis unfolded, and the figures of WFP, WHO, and FAO clearly tell us that Afghanistan, 50% of the people are food insecure, and 60% of the maternal and neonatal deaths are ascribed to lack of essential health care. There's a complete or a partial media blackout on the kind of humanitarian crisis that is unfolding inside Afghanistan. And the government, which is beleaguered, their problems have been enhanced because there are elements, non-state actors like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, ETIM, and those actors have found the vacuum ideal to find their presence there, and they are also creating problems for the government. So Taliban government is not in a position to, fully take on those non-state actors, and it is also facing problems in controlling those elements who launch attacks on other countries like the TTP, which is Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, a terrorist entity which is located inside Afghanistan, and it is launching attacks on Pakistan's territory. Despite the bonhomie between Pakistan's government and Taliban and the good traditional ties, Taliban government has not been able to fully rein in the depredations of TTP, essentially because of their lack of control and because of their economic weakness. And the international community has a role to play in this, because unless international community engages with them, accords them, gives them some kind of economic strength, contributes to humanitarian, aid, the country will slide further into an abyss of misgovernance. And an unstable Afghanistan would always keep South Asia unstable, and it would always lead to a kind of a security vacuum and a black hole in which all the criminal non-state actors throughout the world will find hatcheries and nurseries and sanctuaries to conduct their terrorist activities. So it is a matter of concern for international community, the regional countries too, and the South Asian main protagonists in this conflict equation to form a consensus to engage and to find a mechanism by which the Taliban government could be engaged and could be taken out of its isolation, could be helped. And that's a big challenge. So that challenge is impacting on the security dynamics of South Asia as well. Then Pakistan's economic isolation was broken by China, and the China-Pakistan economic corridor acted as a kind of a leverage with Pakistan, which promised economic emancipation of the entire society, because it promised 64 billion worth of infrastructural projects, energy projects, then the special economic zone. So it was infrastructure, it was energy infrastructure, and the industrial zones that were supposed to usher in a renaissance, an industrial renaissance in Pakistan, connecting Pakistan's strategic border port with the north of China and establishing a new corridor linking China with South Asia, and in the bargain connecting CPEC with Central Asia as well, because interest has been evinced by Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan to link up with CPEC, and even China has evinced its willingness to connect, because it's a win-win economic proposition for the countries of South and Central Asia and China as well. But this is all coming a cropper because of the unstable security situation in Afghanistan, because of the big power rivalry that is pulling the South Asia away towards rivalries like Indo-Pacific, jostle for power to contain China, and this all bodes ill for the security and economic integration of the region. But promise-wise, as I mentioned in my discourse earlier, there's a promise of 35 billion alone between India and Pakistan trade. And imagine if the whole Central Asia from Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and going all the way to Central Asia, it is integrated, and the SEO countries are also connected, then there is a huge economic bonanza that's likely to accrue to the whole South Asia, changing our entire security and economic landscape away from geopolitics to geoeconomics. So these were my 2 cents, and I'll stop here and would like to listen to the other speakers. And if, in case there are any questions to be answered, we'll be happy to reply. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brigadier Rashid. That was very insightful. Indeed, there is no chance of economic integration without security assurances on board, which are quite impossible right now because of the Afghanistan situation spilling over to neighboring states, especially Pakistan. Let's move now to our next worthy speaker. I now welcome Professor Paul Scott. He is a founding board member and currently chairperson of the Center for Research and Development's International Board of Trustees, Mutari, Zimbabwe, currently based in Paris and teaching at the Catholic University of Lille. Before relocating to France, Dr. was a full-time faculty member at Kansai Gaidi University, Japan. He also served as course director on democratizing and development at European Peace University, Austria, and is also a faculty member and PhD supervisor at Joan University, Spain. His research interests include democracy, development, and conflict studies. Professor Scott, please share your analysis on effects of COVID, as you were discussing earlier with me that you've been in Pakistan quite a few times, and also what kind of governance issues Pakistan must deal with. Thank you. Maybe have you on board.
Well, thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me. I am certainly not an expert on Pakistan. I'm actually trained in Chinese-Japanese studies, and I was based in East Asia for most of my life. And I've visited and worked in Pakistan for an NGO in Pakistan, or at least 6 or 7 times, working on women's empowerment issues and observing elections. And I'm teaching conflict mediation. And I don't mean to lecture to people. And I don't. I wish my students could listen to this seminar because it is so instructive and so insightful. If we were going to have a formula for peace, it would certainly include something to do with trauma and healing, and also with resolving conflict. And that would have to be one of the basic, or two of the basic planks of peace building. And unfortunately, conflicts have not been resolved in South Asia, and traumas have been piling one on top of the other, with actually no time for healing. And part of this trauma is caused internally, and some of it is externally. And my very, very good friend in Pakistan would always say that he is absolutely tired of Pakistan being a frontline state on the war against terror. And maybe the part of speech is wrong there. It's the war of terror or the war on terror. We can discuss that as well. I was very, very interested in Dr. Geithner talking about polarization. And in the country that I was born in, the United States, I haven't lived there for half my life. We could even call it hyperpolarization. And this is also being fed by social media. And there is an absolute absence of dialogue. And there is debate, and debate, it doesn't matter who wins the debate, you haven't convinced the other side. So social media, polarization, and the word that I have not heard from my esteemed colleagues is the rise of populism. And it was alluded to we have to be careful with populism because the European variety is certainly different than that in South America. And in South Asia, what do we have in India? And that's a question. And is this Hindu nationalist populism extraordinarily dangerous? And especially with over 200 million Muslims living in India, perhaps more, and the count is hard. So how the rise of populism, not just in Asia, but we're talking about South Asia, is a worldwide phenomena, and it's being fed by many, many forces. And one of them, we would, the Europeans in this program could dispute me, but a driving force is not migration, it's inequality. And inequality is extraordinarily strong in South Asia, and it's been rising. And part of the rise is not just poor governance and poor budgets. We can talk about military budgets in Pakistan and India, especially nuclear military budgets, perhaps where that money could be better spent. But COVID, which has given rise to, I think, traumas and conflicts at the education level, and at the healthcare level, at the governance level, and at the information level, because institutions have suffered out of science is one of them that has suffered, and the World Health Organization has suffered, and governing bodies have. Please, I'm not denying the effectiveness of vaccines and the need for them, but governments certainly have not been as transparent as they can. And this is something, as far as peace building is concerned, that South Asia could, you know what I'm going to say, could cooperate, communicate, at the institutional level to share health information. They did not during COVID, or they did not as effectively as they could. Education, my figures are almost 500 million children's education was affected in South Asia. And also a figure that I get is almost 500,000 increase, almost 500,000 increase. The numbers are not accurate on teenage pregnancies. This is something that is going to affect the region for the long term. I would again stress the need for dialogue, the need for empathy, which again would be another formula, another factor in our peace formula. Noor mentioned that South Asia is 25% of the world's population. My goodness, that's almost 2 billion people. So the levels, especially of increases in poverty, increases in the poverty of education, increases in the poverty of services, and the rise of again, it's governance. I'm sort of sighing and shaking my head, is that it's always governance. And it's always not, I'm almost pounding the table in frustration. It's the quality of democracy, not the quantity of it. And the Americans get this wrong all the time. And the Americans get wrong all the time because they're the factor in this, because they have a very loud voice. In promoting they should be promoting the rule of law instead of other interests. So the rule of law is certainly has to be stressed as well. I have an email that I wanted to share with you from my best friend in Pakistan, who I've worked with for over 25 years. And he wrote me just yesterday, and he said, Pakistan is going through terrible times. Price hikes, unemployment, curbs on freedom. And then he mentions members of the government. And actually, I went, this is very political, and I'm sorry to name names. He mentioned the head of the People's Party. And I went to his Wikipedia site. And they have his nickname, and his nickname is Mr. 10%. Everyone in the room knows this. And I was shocked that it was on the Wikipedia site for him. So I wonder who wrote it. So the issue is corruption as well, part of good governance. And again, I've done this because we've all done workshops on this. Corruption is not one way. It is two ways. So we always blame them for corruption, and I'm talking as an American citizen and from the West, but we also feed it as well. So that is hardly addressed, and that has to be addressed. We would say it takes two to tango, two to dance, and the corruption factor is certainly there. I have only 15 seconds left. I would like to talk about the NGO community. And I always outrage people when I say that NGO stands for no good organization. That is not true. It is non-government. There are good and bad and efficient and inefficient NGOs. There are wonderful NGOs, and I am a member of 3 of them. And I work with one in Pakistan. And it is exactly what our speaker has said. It is people to people, not government to government. And the NGOs play the bridge role on this and the peace building role on this. And whether it's women's empowerment across Southeast Asia, or healthcare, or childhood education, or computer literacy, my goodness, these are issues that NGOs can take up. So that is strengthening using the NGO sector, and the NGOs playing this role. This is a budget problem, I understand, it is certainly doable. Someone talked about the trilogy of regrets: should have, could have, and would have. I think we shouldn't have regrets. I think we can take action today. I've gone to so many meetings, and it's always, well, what we can do now. And what we can do now is, NGOs can begin to communicate with each other. And I would use that as a peace building proposal. Okay, I'm sorry I went over by a minute. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Professor Scott. Thank you for highlighting the grassroots level and public sector level challenges faced by Pakistan, like many other developing states. That was very insightful. Let's move to our last speaker for today. That is Dr. Afsar Rathore. Dr. Rathore is a career diplomat with over 30 years of distinguished services with United Nations around the world. He has served as an executive at the United Nations, commission responsible for implementing million-dollar projects. His experience includes working at UN Department of Peacekeeping, serving several war-hit conflict zones. He left the UN 3 years ago to work as a volunteer across various developing countries, including Pakistan, on a variety of social, economic, and environmental challenges. He is the president of Leo Soil, an organization which is Austria-based and works on environmental land erosion, desertification, and regenerative agriculture management. Very interesting portfolio. We are very, very interested in hearing how you look at the regional challenges, Dr. Rathore, and what is the way forward, if any, for development and peace in the region. So over to you now.
Your mic is muted.
Okay, now I think our speaker is muted.
Yes, Dr. Afsar, can you hear us? You
Yeah.
can unmute and participate. Thank you so much.
Can you hear me now?
Absolutely fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you see my presentation? Hello?
Not yet. I think you will have to share your screen for that.
Oh, okay.
Yes. You might have a button in the middle. It's highlighted in green. It says share screen. Yeah.
All together. Screen sharing. Okay. I have some problem.
1 second, sorry. There seems to be some problem.
I will.
It's absolutely fine. Take your time, please. It's okay.
Okay. I will go through that. My son is trying to fix that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I appreciate the opportunity provided to me by Islamabad Policy Research Institute for organizing the webinar on this important topic and region, which is unfortunately, to my knowledge, neglected by the Western world. My previous two scholar has also mentioned that. Although I believe that it is a very dynamic region with vast potential and opportunity, at the same time confronted with several challenges which need to be addressed through peaceful means and dialogue. It hosts over, as mentioned, 25% of the world population, and the GDP growth, the combined GDP for the region was last year in 2021 was around $4,000 billion, over $4 trillion. The major
Пидораска, я сейчас еду заявление писать. Сука! Сейчас через 2 пас, подожди, что с вами будет? Со всеми, сука! Как твой папа ебать будет? Вот так. Пидораска, ремнем тебя ебать будет. Подожди, ты что думаешь, вам
I think you.
пидорасы?
Hello, somehow or the other, somebody is interrupted. The major and important stakeholder in the Asia, South Asia, or India and Pakistan, however, cannot utilize their potential due to unsolved territorial issues in general, and Kashmir, I think, is the particular. Therefore, I start my intervention with the two statements from the US administration. Kashmir is the most dangerous place in the world, said the US President Clinton after India and Pakistan conducted nuclear bomb tests on 11th and 28th May 1998, respectively. Former US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in his book, which was recently published on 24th of January, the title of the book is Never Give an Inch. And he mentioned that, quote, India and Pakistan were on the verge of a nuclear war in 2019, but the US intervention stopped the situation from escalating. I do not think the world properly know how close India and Pakistan came to spilling over into a nuclear war in February 2019. So Kashmir is the flashpoint between the both countries who fought. Now you can see my screen?
Yes.
So the flashpoint is the flashpoint is Kashmir between the two countries who fought 3 wars since 1947. The involvement of UN, and that is where I will be talking, brought some kind of peace to the region. And there are 11 resolution of the UN on the issue, but there are 11. I am not going, because of the time constraint, I'm not going to go all through all that resolution, but just to want to show you that there were at that time 11 member of the Security Council, 5 permanent and 6 rotating, which changed in 1965 to 10 to N5. But you can see that what I want to show, there was no vote against that. There was 2 abstention always from Soviet Union and Ukraine, but and it was always passed mid-majority, 8, 9, 10 to think. But the most important resolution of all of that was resolution number 47, which was also very much criticized by several US members. And if you read the major point of all these 11 resolutions, you will find that all resolution mention determination of future status of the state of Jammu and Kashmir in accordance with the will of the people through the democratic methods of a free and impartial plebiscite. The major resolution, as I mentioned, is 47, and it has some drawbacks and weakness according to me and also to a lot of experts. I quote the statement of the former UN diplomat Joseph Korbel from Czechoslovakia and the father of the Madeleine Albright, the US Secretary of State during Clinton administration. Mr. Joseph Korbel was a member of the UN's Security Council Commission to find a peaceful settlement. He was not satisfied with the text of the resolution number 47 passed in April 1948. Mr. Korbel joined the UN's commission in 1950, and I quote, the resolution 47 did not consist of directive to the party, but rather recommendation. This bound in parties only morally, but without any legal consequences. The final resolution of the conflict rested with the government of India and Pakistan and dependent on their goodwill. And that is the problem. Mr. Korbel further stated that the Security Council could have requested the opinion of the legal issue. Had been done, the Corbel said the Security Council could have requested the International Court of Justice to give an advisory opinion on the legal issue, and the Security Council could have been in a stronger position to declare one of the parties to be in the wrong, and the handling of this dispute would have been easier. In the event of approach of the Security Council was, and he was used very strong word, timid in Corbel's view. Even the US ambassador to the UN, Mr. Warner Austin, who also joined the commission later, also supported Corbel's view. He thought the resolution, as well as the other resolution that followed, were unrealistic, ineffective, and they depended on the goodwill of India and Pakistan cooperating with the Security Council, and failed to give it and the authority to impose sanction. And that is, I think, the most important thing. The people of Kashmir showed enormous patience and had hope that the world community will come forward and give them the right of self-determination as per the resolutions of the UN Security Council. However, after the passage of 42 years, the people of Kashmir started an uprising in 1989 against the Indian occupation and for their right for self-determination, which is still ongoing. There are estimates that suggest that 100,000 mostly innocent civilians have been killed since 1918. Several human rights groups, including the UN, report strongly condemn the unlawful enforced disappearance, torture, rape, and other human rights abuses which have occurred in Jammu and Kashmir since 1918. I am just going through some of these reports. UN High Commission report on human rights to 2018-19, parliamentary US-UK parliamentary group on Kashmir, October 2018, US Congressional panel on Kashmir on October 2019, European Union resolution on Kashmir, March 2000, similarly July 2008 on allegation of mass graves in Indian administrative Kashmir. 6 resolutions were tabled in the European Parliament on Kashmir in January 2020. Human Rights Watch World Report is 2018. Asia Watch, Amnesty International, a lot of reports. You can see that. All that happened. Now the big question should be asked if all these reports and the 3 wars between India and Pakistan brought any positive impact on the suffering of Kashmiris. This question I would leave it here. To my knowledge, no, not at all. As a student of history, and I think Scott has really brought that, Professor Scott also mentioned something which I also wanted to go. And as a student of history, I observed, unfortunately, a similarity between the end of 1920s in Germany and now in India. Unfortunately, Hitler was also supported by the influential German part of the society to fight against the influence of communism in 1920s and 30s. And later, the world paid a high price with over 60 million deaths due to race supremacy and German nationalism. This is the case which also Professor Scott mentioned, that the history is repeating again, and the West and the Western world would like to curtail China by strengthening India. Regrettably, and that is the unfortunate, and it is undeniable that secular India of Gandhi, which we knew, is moving towards Hindu supremacy and nationalism under Modi. So what is the way forward? I mean, we talk about, this was some information for my audience in the West, which always ask me why the UN has not done something. I am from the nature an optimistic person and believe that South Asia leadership can learn from Europe. And what is the way forward? Even Europe went through destruction, devastation, and misery after the Second World War. However, the leadership, and that is what we need here, the courageous leadership had a vision for peace for the next generation. Arch enemies for centuries, who fought several dozen wars, Germany and France, I mean, become friends for peace and prosperity for their people. The famous German Prime Minister Konrad Adenauer and the French President Charles de Gaulle are considered the father of European Union. If I can see the European model, and this was also the basis which had started from Germany France and Belgium, Benelux countries, and Italy, the model of European Union in 1950, which we see is today, what we have achieved with this connectivity and with this cooperation with each other to achieve harmony with within the European Union country. You can imagine that since 1945, there is no war or conflict among the member of the European Union countries. To bind the European nation into a single entity, which is happening, so economic, social, and security cooperation to move free in European 27 European countries, to have same rights for all European citizens, and to be more influential and economical bloc, to be free trade agreement within the European Union, which SART has also similarly, and Professor, I think Scott also mentioned about that, to create a single currency of Europe. These are the way which brought the prosperity and peace in European Union. And I think this could also be learned by the South Asian countries, especially Pakistan and India. Way forward, if you can see, UN, US, and European Union are also urging India and Pakistan to resolve the Kashmir issue conflict through dialogue and come to a peaceful bilateral resolution. Even Trump administration and current Biden administration have offered facilitation without success. Pakistan is going through a general election in 2023. And India is going for election in 2024. Modi, there are predictions that the BJP under Modi will win the election in 2024. This will be his third term. And by 2029, Mr. Modi will be almost 80 years. I don't believe that he will run for the fourth time. And this will be for him, the third term might bring this, give him the courage from both sides of the leadership from Pakistan and India to come and try to solve the problem and issue of Kashmir and bring prosperity and peace in the region, which could, as mentioned before by all my three speakers, that could be bring prosperity and peace in the region. So this is end of my my intervention. Is finally, I just want to share the last thing. This is also from the president of the Security Council, French representative. He mentioned on 18th of May 1964, and I will just take only two paragraphs from him. The member of the Security Council expressed their concern with respect to great country which have everything to join from re-establishing good relationship with each other by solving the Kashmir issue. And paragraph F also member mentioned that the two countries should start a dialogue to solve the Kashmir issue. And I think that is what need to be done. And both leadership need to come together and really try to solve this issue of the Kashmir issue and go for the prosperity. Thank you very much. Thank you. I took a bit longer, but it was important to share my views. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I think this concludes our presentations for today. We have quite a few questions coming in our chat box. IPRI always welcomes intellectual engagement and policy dialogue. Unfortunately, Brigadier Jinjua had to leave, but we do have Ambassador Fawzia Sana, and I will be maybe troubling her and redirecting questions to her, if any. Let me give everyone just 2 minutes in which they can contemplate their thoughts and maybe leave a few more questions in the chat box. In the meanwhile, the questions that have already arrived, I will discipline them and redirect them at our speakers. 2 minutes, please.
Who should start?
Yeah, this is a good question.
I will be redirecting the questions in a minute.
I'm sorry, Noor.
Yes.
I was about to leave. Actually, you did not ask me that I would be answering any of the questions. I have attended the conference. It was very informative. and the speakers were very frank in their comments and expressing their concerns, but I'm extremely sorry. I may not be able to stay to respond to any of the questions.
That's
I
absolutely
would beg
understandable.
leave. Thank you.
That's absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We're so happy
Okay.
to have you. Okay, so a few of the questions, I think maybe we can direct the first question to Dr. Paul. Many of the participants are asking about your thoughts on how do you think religious and ethnic leaders from South Asia can contribute towards grassroots level peace and harmony? Because this is a huge issue. These are ethnically diverse communities, and ethno-religious identities are a huge drivers of conflict or peace in this region. So if you could just share your thoughts on that, Dr. Paul.
I think his mic is not active.
Very sorry. Yeah, when you have, to answer your question, when you have a very small fire, you can either throw gasoline on the fire or you can throw water on the fire. And it is the responsibility of religious and ethnic leaders to be aware of how their rhetoric shapes the conflict and promotes and exacerbates, increases the conflict. We need more conflict dampeners and more conflict and that has not happened. And again, social media plays a negative role in this as well. It could play a positive role. Identity and religion are what will continue to be increasing flashpoints in this century, and we have to recognize the need for people to have identity and not to be but we also have to be aware of the dangers of that as well, and that is the job of religious leaders. Is that more than 2 minutes? I can go on for, yeah, I think that's enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your brilliant thoughts. I think that the next question would best be addressed by President IPRI, if he may kindly. The questions are basically, several questions came in terms of trying to contextualize the challenges that the region faces in terms of the irony, where the region has to choose between connectivity and competition. So what are your thoughts, Ambassador Raza Mohammed, if you may? What exactly is keeping the region from connecting and integrating economically? And which is the biggest spoiler of peace in the region?
Yeah, thank you so much, Nurline. I think it's a very, very important question, and one may say that answer is simplest, but the solution is more complex. Question good, why, and important why? Because the destiny of people is interconnected with the connectivity. And my take is when the destinies of the people of the region are intertwined, the peace will come automatically. When the benefit and advantages or losses are combined or shared, the people will, I think, stop fighting and start cooperating. But how to go about it, as you said, how to do it, that's the most difficult thing. I think, as I said in the beginning, giving the example of EU, it's a long history, but they started off with that coal and steel community in 1950 and 51, and today they're like one country. And same is the case here, that unfortunately India is the biggest country in the region, biggest economy in the region, biggest democracy in the region, and perhaps it has a very, very good diaspora and very capable human resource, which is working all over the world. The country is, as Brigadier Jinjua said, we have not been able to get a positive answer to the offer of olive branches or offer of the negotiations. Unless we sit and talk, we cannot resolve the differences. All the wars, all the disputes, and on the negotiating table. And this is the lesson from the history, which we must learn here in the South Asia. India being a biggest economy, bigger military power, and more importantly, a strategic ally of the United States and being very, very relevant to the United States interests here in the region, has to actually look back, sit back, and see that instead of riding the tide of arrogance because of the relevance or because of the populism inside, Mr. Modi and the government of India should actually take the olive branch and sit and talk. Unless we talk, we cannot move forward. And simplest answer is the conflict resolution is very, very important. But it is not a must that we resolve the most difficult things first. We can start out from the win-win situation, from the easily doable things, from the low-hanging fruits, and move forward. And as I said, when the destinies of the nations will be intertwined, the disputes will be resolved too. So I repeat that we need to actually request, impress, or press upon the bigger power in this region to sit on the negotiating table and look around and resolve the disputes with the neighbors, not only with Pakistan, with the other countries also. Thank you so much.
Absolutely brilliant. I agree with you that gaining initial momentum through dialogue is the key to moving forward for the region. The next question is addressed particularly to Dr. Gardner, if I may read it out. It says, beside nationalism and religion, which are used as tools for extremism in South Asia, especially in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, how non-traditional security threats will be eliminated to maintain peace in South Asia? Dr. Gardner, if you may, please.
Thank you for the question. Maybe I will respond by using some analogies. And when I talked about the Daunt period in the 70s, of course, it was linked to other issues as well, the German Ostpolitik and also arms control measures and confidence-building measures. But at the same time, of course, there was the Chinese-American approachment policy. And when President Nixon and Kissinger went to Mao after the summit, Mao reduced its support for insurgents in East Asia. So if you have a cooperation on the top, there will be a reduction of extremists on the bottom as well. The counterexample would be, and I think Ambassador Rather already referred to this period after 1918, and there was Versailles, and there was this isolation of Germany and asking for reparations. And this helped this extreme right-wing party of Adolf Hitler to rise. So if you isolate extremism will be on the rise as well. There is a positive example, of course, and I mentioned the Helsinki Final Act, and it was a cooperation on the top. But it encouraged also civil society. So the Helsinki Accords also encouraged the civil rights movement in Czechoslovakia, the Charter 77. So if there's a cooperation on the top, it will reduce extremism on the bottom, but also encourage civil society.
Thank you very much for your insight. It's very helpful indeed. I think that the session has definitely taken a lot of our questions and entertained them. I think that I would like to pose another question to Dr. Afsar. Doctor, if you could kindly help the participants understand the grave and starking difference between human rights abuse and grave violations or crimes against humanity that are being committed under the watch of Indian government in Kashmir. What is the difference between these two terms, and which kind of international mechanisms, international legal mechanisms and conventions are in place to make sure that the Indian violations and gross violations of human and humanitarian rights are reported and maybe even brought to justice?
So very good and very difficult question. The problem, as I think my two scholars before also very comprehensively explained, and I also confront it every day to see that always the national interest sometime and very often now in the Western world, and my engagement with the United Nations around the world in these war-hit areas, see that the national interest will always prevail on the human rights issues. And that is what need to be again changed. I think if you read the criticism of 1950 by Dr. Corwell, he very actually mentioned that how the thing could have been manipulated. So the problem remains that which side of on which side we are sitting and discussing the human rights issues. Unfortunately, I mentioned that right now there is this kind of a nationalism, this kind of a religious supremacy, which we are fighting. You mentioned before also about the religion, what religion can play. I saw, for example, during the Rwandan genocide in 1994, when I was a young officer there, I saw how the religious leader actually aggravated the whole issue of killing against the same religious people, but ethnically different. And I used the same religious leader in order to come to a reconciliation. And so we started in 1994 a so-called reconciliation and truth process, which ended in 2013-14 with again intermarriages between the Hutus and Tutsis. So coming to your question, which is a really very important, very difficult, but several human rights commissions, several human rights institutions are explaining what is happening, but yet the world community, especially in the Western world, they have been ignoring because they have a much bigger interest. And I am also quoting the European Union spokesperson who said, yes, we know what is happening in Kashmir, and we know it is not right. However, we have much bigger interest in India financially and otherwise in order to curtail China. So a lot of that human rights violation will be ignored or overseen, unfortunately.
Thank you. That was definitely very direct of you. We appreciate your directness on the topic. I think I would like to direct the next question to Dr. Paul, if I may. Several participants are asking or are very inquisitive on how grave is the crisis of right-wing populism's rise in India, and how do you think it is going to affect or is affecting the region and India's own security? Thank you. Professor, if I may, I think you're muted, if you could kindly. Thank you so much.
Yes, I think right-wing populism is extremely dangerous and in India, and it is again misinformation and disinformation. People don't talk about malinformation, and malinformation is the deliberate use of misleading and false information to promote violence, if you like. I don't like, and it is the spreading of rumors that is extraordinarily dangerous on social media. And I don't have off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I actually teach this, I should know this. I don't know what the internet diffusion rate is in South Asia, in India or Pakistan. I think I don't know the diffusion rate, but it's getting higher, and this is wonderful for a variety of reasons. But of course, it'll be used like any tool. It will be used in a good way and also in a disadvantageous and negative way. And it's the skillful use by right-wing populist, extremist, nationalist, religious leaders. They're very skillful in packaging and their products, so to speak, not just in South Asia, but in Europe and in North America as well. Thank you.
Interesting intake. I agree with you. One last question. I guess I would like to maybe redirect it to our president at IPRI. I can read it out for you, President, if you may. How do you look at the prospect of economic integration in the region when CPEC has opposition from India? What should be the way out? The regional countries, in particular Pakistan and Bangladesh, could, for example, align and be the lead players in regional connectivity. Your thoughts, please.
Once again, thank you so much, Nurulain, and thank you to the one who posed this question. I think this is another important question which we need to actually answer. Regional connectivity and Belt and Road Initiative. Belt and Road Initiative comprises 6 land corridors, and out of these 6 land corridors, there are 2 which concern the South Asia. One is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is passing through Pakistan, goes to Gwadar, and the other is Bangladesh-India-Myanmar China Corridor. So these are 2 corridors which are part of the Belt and Road Initiative, other than their sea lanes, which are called the MSRI. Right. Now, issue. First of all, as far as the Belt and Road Initiative is concerned, it is being seen as a Chinese bid to increase its sphere of influence by United States and the West. Whereas China claims it is not for increase of the influence, but it is a kind of win-win cooperation, and it is the cooperation of the willings and so on and so forth. United States, India, and other term it as a solo, whereas China says it is symphony, not a solo. So this is the contradiction. However, what is more important is that Bangladesh has been integrated, Sri Lanka has been integrated, Myanmar has been integrated in the Chinese economic cooperation. Pakistan has been integrated. Although I must flag here one point, that Belt and Road Initiative had raised alarms in West and in India. So what China has done is most probably, I do not have any authentic information, but this is what my analysis and guess is, that China has intentionally perhaps slowed down the BRI. And if you see the 20th CPC communique, the 5 areas of significance or importance or priority which have been given out after the 20th CPC by Chinese, BRI is a miss. This indicates that perhaps China is also thinking on this, that it may not alarm Western United States. China, by nature, by history, by chemistry, is not an aggressive state. It does not have a story of aggression. It does not have a history of annexation, territorial annexations, or the colonies. Now, back how to make it happen. If these 3-4 countries are cooperating with China, and they benefit ultimately when the BRI is fully operationalized or the CPEC is fully operationalized, there would be a great economic activity going on around India. And I think at one time, the India may realize that it should become part of the regional connectivity. However, at present, one sees a lot of resistance from Indian side, and reasons are obvious, as we have discussed it already, that India is the strategic ally or strategic partner of the United States in countering the Chinese rise. So we do not foresee that India will join CPEC or the Bangladesh-India-Myanmar corridor. They are not likely to join. However, what we can do is, at least at the regional level, as the Director of Research, Brigadier Rashid, highlighted the issue of Afghanistan's stability, we can, as South Asian, encourage the interconnectivity. We could revive SAARC and other organs of SAARC, and benefit for each other is ensured. That's the only way. And major hurdle will remain the Pakistan-India's disputes, because both the countries, I would say, have actually made SAARC kind of inoperational, hostage, or whatever you may say. So again, going back to the same point, and it has been highlighted by all the worthy speakers and Dr. Rathore also, that nothing may move unless we sit and talk and resolve the disputes. And we have so many examples with us. For example, China had 14 disputes with the territorial disputes, and out of 14, it has resolved 12 disputes with the countries around. And they have even burnt out the old maps. The only left disputes are with India and Bhutan. So that virtually means one party. So the differences can be resolved. EU, United States, and other bigger powers can actually help and nudge both the countries to come together, talk, discuss, and resolve. And this will be the only way. Thank you. However, yes, sorry, one point. Pakistan's options. Pakistan should not be deterred by the opposition. Pakistan should continue with its CPEC program or project with China, because that is the only foreign direct investment presently available to Pakistan. And if you want to shift to geoeconomy, CPEC becomes an important vehicle for that. Thank you, Noor.
Thank you so much for such an insightful overview and summing up the entire session, really, in your thoughts. How wonderful to have you speak to us on these matters. This question, by the way, was from Ms. Amna at our very own IPRI. A lot of the questions I had to jumble up, and so the speakers, I hope they had their answers contextualized so wonderfully by our speakers. I think that today was a very engaging and a very, very insightful session. A lot of intellectual debate, many ideas, a lot of food for thought. I would like to thank everybody who participated and who came up, invested their wonderful time and thoughts. I think that what makes this webinar most wonderful is that we had people look at the South Asian security paradigm from various angles, from domestic politics, from the rising of polarities, from nationalism and religious extremism, etc. How wonderful. I hope that this was as a learning experience it was for you as it was for me. I would like to now take my leave, and we thank you all for your time on behalf of IPRI. Always a pleasure to engage with intellectuals from across the globe and from across Pakistan.
Thank you so much, Noor. And let me once again thank all the speakers, all the participants who are here with us. And I'm sure I've learned a lot. They would have learned a lot. It was a webinar for mutual learning. There was one question which I saw it flashed after we had closed, bashing India. No, we do not mean to bash India. Not at all. Let me state it, it is not India bashing. We just want to actually convey to the India and people of India that Pakistan is willing for peace. Pakistan is willing to talk. Pakistan is willing to resolve the differences without using the instrument of war, but through trade and diplomacy for the people of this region and for the people of both the countries. We need it more than India. Thank you so much. Yes, Noor.
Thank you so much. Thank you, President, for these wrapping up thoughts. Absolutely fundamental to wrap up the session in an immaculate way. Thank you, everyone. I think we'll be signing off now. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
Thank you all.
Right.